Next up, we have Seth Katz. I'm going to talk real slow so Seth has time to move from the back of the room. Seth Katz is an artist and writer based in San Francisco. He writes poetry, essays, articles, short stories, but mostly zines, again, which you can buy at our merch table. He writes about politics, feminism, gender, identity, and places they overlap. Please give it up for Seth.
My gender dysphoria and height dysphoria showing. Thank you for Meg and Lauren for making this look really easy. I'm not good at public speaking. So happy Intergalactic Trans Day of Visibility to everyone. I'm going to read 4 short poems and a little bit of a short story that are about being trans. Also my handshake.
You're perfect. You're perfect.
Thank you. You have to say that because it's Trans Day of Visibility. I don't make the rules.
Just gotta follow.
There's a mantra, a story I know too well, reverberated within my community, that of our curse. It begins with a couple. They are old, maybe barren, but together they are a prayer. Our merciful God, like any other unnamed con artist, is quick to answer. You ask me for a child? Yes, they cry, we will give anything. I can give you a son, he bellows, but I will need something in exchange. Anything, they cry, we will give anything. Then I will give you your son, but you must be patient and trust in my ways. Yes, they cry, we will give anything. And his voice cracks through the sky. There's no need to repeat yourself, guys, I can hear you, I fucking got this one. And so the wife became pregnant and they thanked their generous God or trick of the light, but soon they forgot about him and their deal because like most of us, we only think of God when we're asking for something. When the wife gave birth, the doctor announced it was to a beautiful baby girl, and the old couple was so happy they didn't worry about having a son. Besides maybe a few times when they realized it might be easier than having a little girl in this world. The healthy young girl grew into a beautiful young woman, and the old couple loved her endlessly and gave her everything in this world. But it didn't take long for the vengeful God to return for his end of the bargain. Like many gods of old, for some reason they have a weird fucking thing for little girls. I'm looking at you Greeks. Their trickster God came in the night and took his prize. But the old couple wouldn't be empty-handed because their God left a double-edged gift in return as promised. So the next one is about a Greek myth about basically Poseidon, like a lot of the Greek gods, had a illicit affair with a mortal girl, and when she basically asked him for something in return, and she said, I've always felt like a man, can you make me into one? And he granted her that, and she became the strongest warrior in all the land, and became a king. And Zeus got jealous and sent down a bunch of centaurs to battle him now. And finally one of the centaurs beat him in battle, and he turned into a bird of some kind. Maybe I should know this more before I talk about it, but so here's the poem. It's called Ovid Has Spoken Kindly of You. Ode to mighty sinews, strown by vast oceans to be reborn, of the strongest men earth had bred once the fairest daughter. And you, as Latreus, spitting in my face, clotting dirt in my wounds again and again. Seenest, you bitch, must I tolerate you? You will always be seenest to me. Return your distaff and basket of wool and leave the fighting to men. Crush me in the shattering hail of heavy pine trunks, and I will come again as I have before. Woo! They asked me before if I was reading something sad or happy so they could like get the order right, and I was like,
That is the correct answer.
What makes a man? When we weigh boyhood in split lips and bloody knuckles, is a man his conquest, his chromosomes, tears he didn't cry, words he wouldn't speak, is it measured in inches? What makes a girl? Is a lady's worth calculated in the angles of her curves, of her hips and smile, how soft and smooth her rosy cheeks? Is she but her womb or her wounds? Sometimes there is poetry, entire psalms and the sounds of silence, and other times the inflections of my own voice are deafening. Some days I can build a home inside my body, and other days it's as if Judas himself has kissed my flesh. And then, depending on how much time I have left, I'm just going to read a little bit. Every trans person's birthday is today, so sweet birthday, baby. Oh, happy birthday! So, I'm just going to read this. This is a short story that I'm working on. The lights were hung along the streets, and it felt like our San Francisco neighborhood was a blur in Technicolor. It shouldn't have taken psychedelia to recognize that this was how the Strip once was for everyone, but now it usually just reminds me of all the old white hippies who speak so dearly of it, and it's crying back in the 70s, now just an old sold-out yuppie. This was my second December at the bookstore, which meant my second birthday, second Christmas, second Thanksgiving, and second New Year's. But when I was hired 2 years ago, things were different. With time, I've gotten better at preparing myself for the suffering that is retail amidst the holidays, but beyond that, my face and skin and voice were softer then, without the not-so-gentle touch of outside intervention. I was so juvenile in my boyhood, I was practically an adolescent girl. Many would even argue that I was, but I wasn't, and I'm not. I was somewhat familiar with the street before I got the job, having lived in the city since I left home at 17. But I wasn't nearly as intimate as those who were around in its prime back in the summer of love. Now it was depressing into another tourist trap within a greater context of an entire city that also acted as one. Even in the sparse amount of time I spent in the area, the turnover was clear. The street was in an almost constant state of reincarnation, purging itself of any venue more than a few years old and filling the void with new and trendier spots, careful not to leave any storefront empty too long as the rent would reflect it. Tourists and old hippies both tend to overthink the street. It's like they're overcompensating for its gentrification. I know I can't say much since I wasn't around to witness the glory of the 60s or 70s or even 80s, so I guess I can't blame them for holding on. But now it's pretty much a glorified strip mall with some history. Tourists come in and shop and ask me recommendations for a cute and genuine hate spot. Call me cynical, but there's not really much left. Not to mention that no matter where you go, I can promise you that the Grateful Dead aren't going to bust through the door and play Friend of the Devil. But the bookstore has stood long before me against the test of rent and management and time. When I interviewed, my then managers didn't even press about my name and gender, almost illegible, but definitely distinct from any legal paperwork. I recall having a line prepared just in case it was brought up, which it usually was. Just weeks prior, a first date had taken one look at me and asked my real name. I suppose it was difficult to understand why my feminine features didn't match my masculine title. Long after the failed evening out, I realized I should have fought back and stood up for my manhood. I should have told them that it was my given name and that I gave it to myself. Shakespeare said some pretty interesting things about names. I definitely fit my name better now than I did 2 years ago, slowly growing into it like big boy pants. But after what seemed like endless sheets of paperwork and several trips to court, which sourly reminded me of a fractured adolescence, the name finally belonged to me in the eyes of the state. For a long time, I didn't even care about the legalities of changing it. If people wanted to know my name, then they would have to take my word for it. If they didn't trust my word, then they didn't deserve the intimacy of knowing it. But in our advanced dystopia of the 21st century, it isn't nearly that simple. Like other self-titled adults, I own a credit card, have a social security number, and other little rectangles that seem to freely hand out my past. It was a whole other bureaucratic dance with the devil to change them. But the ultimate push came from the late-night run to Burger King. When the individual at checkout refused to sell me the meal I was already feeling guilty about buying because they were so sure that I'd stolen the credit card. How could I have a woman's credit card but a man's ID? In my frustration and hunger, I wanted to out myself in hopes of teaching them a lesson, but I realized that this wasn't an after-school special, and most likely no lesson would be learned. Someone might even overhear me and teach me one. Now there is a masculine consistency across all planes: my driver license, bank documents, social security, and rougher face. Even still, strangers only gets it right about half the time. It's not their fault. I understand that I'm short and conditioned with effeminate mannerisms. The bookstore, being glorified retail, requires a generous amount of customer service. I deal with up to 100 strangers a day, recommending them books I've never read, bagging up hardcover new releases I won't be able to afford until they're available at the public library. But before my body started shifting in symbiosis with my change in name, I was seen as the girl with the boy's name. Before I gave myself a name, I had another. If I tell someone or they find out about it now, they always tell me that they couldn't imagine me with such a name. the softened syllables like I had left my new name in water for too long. But they don't realize that the name once fit me snugly. It didn't require any convincing, growing into, or paperwork. It was just there, always, and when I was growing up, I never questioned it, at least not consciously. When I was too young to understand, I would swim alongside my cousins in nothing but shorts. While they bonded over Boy Scouts, I envied their freedom. The camaraderie was nice, but not what was truly enticing. Their sense of adventure was being fanned from every direction while I was stuck with cooties. Of course, looking back, I realized it was a flaw in society and not the fault of any particular young man, including myself. The many girls in their youth wanted what society gifted their male classmates without even fully recognizing that these boys had won the world's favor. But it was more than that. I didn't want to join the boys' club for the freedom or the power. I was just a boy and didn't understand why others didn't see it. When I was a child, my dad would call me all sorts of nicknames. I was his princess, his Bella, and his brown-eyed girl. When I was slightly less of a child, I got one of them tattooed on me in furls of cursive. A year or so passed, and I realized that although it was sweet, it was also a permanent and frivolous tie to a past I no longer embodied. When I got it covered up, the tattoo artist crowded around me, wondering why I was getting it covered up, and even more so, why I had it in the first place. The vulnerability of a tattoo needle carving into my back helped to explain my situation to them. They seemed confused, but also as if my butchy appearance made some newfound sense. I told them about the name on my ID no longer belonged to me, and of course they asked me about my new name. I told them and they seemed amused, like they were living an absurdist story that never actually wanted to vicariously live through. Of all of the concerns passing through my mind during the appointment, one was louder than the rest. I was inking over a childhood memory, sentimental and entrusted to me by my father. In the end, I went through with it and told the name, and the old name was long buried beneath the black and gray of roses and other flash pieces. But even though it's gone and I'm no longer my father's daughter, that doesn't mean I won't always be his child. Most people go through one puberty and some through two. My first was that of a so-called girl becoming a so-called woman, my second being more complex and aided by medical professionals. Like many as an early adolescent, I both enjoyed detesting. It's because I'm talking about puberty. Like many, as an early adolescent, I both enjoyed and detested exploring my identity without even realizing I was doing so. It took years of therapy later in life to even recognize that I was showing signs as early as 9. My bedroom walls draped with posters of boy bands seemed so normal along my childhood peers, yet in reality it was so different. I didn't imagine myself dating these men, but I wanted to be them. But there was even stronger signs that I, of course, didn't pick up on. Long suppressed, but recently discovered, I recall falling in love with strangers in chat rooms on the internet. My teachers and parents taught me well never to reveal my identity to anyone online. This was a poorly conducted excuse to recreate myself. I'll tell these people everything about me, my fears, my taste in music, my dreams, but I wasn't the girl with the soft name. That was the birth of my name, my given name, the name I gave to myself for the sake of self-preservation. I hid this name and aspects of myself so well that even I soon forgot, tucked away at least until I was out of the range of my first adolescence, and difficult enough as it is.
No. Is there more? Give us more.
I'm just gonna, okay. The first couple months of my time at the bookstore was spent being viewed as some sort of butch hybrid. The feminine energy of the store, mostly inhibited by women and other femmes, accepted by my minimal knowledge of astrology and tarot. How I met Lauren.
He's not wrong.
I was practically a lesbian, despite my occasional attraction to men, my identity as man, and the fact that I wasn't a lesbian. But my love of sapphic literature, buzzed hair, and button-ups helped solidify myself at the store. Even as my voice sunk into my diaphragm and the fuzz on my body grew coarse, I could sense it difficult for my peers to shift their perspective of me. To this day, I'm still frequently asked for spare tampons. But back when I applied for the job, I didn't have any intentions or expectations. I was seeking what my fellow recent graduates were also searching for, a semi-decent job to provide barely enough income to cover my overpriced city rent. I didn't expect anything more as I prayed for nothing less. I didn't want to move back in with my parents soon after telling them of my name, but I was happily surprised to realize, of course, I'd be making minimum wage at a shop. It would also provide me health insurance. I never had such luxury before. I took advantage of the opportunity immediately and soon began a weekly ritual of injections. It was incredible peering into 100 milligrams of bile of what the world would see as the essence of man. There are so many different ways to be a boy, and yet the world insists that they all require this one constant. If not natural, store-bought was the second best. And although it wouldn't begin to show for some time, I at least knew the face and voice and figure would soon reflect me. I think so there.
Where else can we find the rest of your work? Where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram at anarcho_loser. And my website is sethkatz.art.
Thank you so much, Seth.